Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be looking over this state of gameplay announcement that Riot made, I guess a couple of days ago at this point. So they're talking about everything from balancing champions to matchmaking to dodging to upcoming items. So there's a ton of material that they're covering, so we're going to get in there and look at this. As always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out a ton on the channel. I am going to be doing more videos like this that I'm aiming to be maybe 15 to 30 minutes, kind of shorter prof talks about a variety of different topics that are going on in League. So be sure to check all that out. If you want to see me stream, that's on Twitch every night starting around midnight Eastern Standard Time. Usually goes till about 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Very friendly, chill community. I try to be as conversational as possible, even while I'm playing games about League or anything else that people want to talk about. So feel free to drop by and see what you think. And then we do less frequent videos as well, like patch notes for every patch, and then tier lists like support, ADC, and a variety of other tiers. And we have a ton of topical guides as well, like best one tricks, how to macro better, how to micro better, and tons of other content on the channel. So be sure to check all that out. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here because this is going to definitely push up against the time limit. Okay, so patch balance in general, if you didn't follow this, last season they decided to go to a more statistical base for patches. I don't know if I can, I can click on it here, and they kind of walk you through these different stats on how they're going to balance. So they made it very, very quantitative. So for example, they have these different levels of play. Average play, they're calling Iron 4 to Gold 1, Skilled is Plat 4 to Grandmaster, Elite is Challenger, and then Pro is basically Pro. And then there were different criteria that they would look at to see if something was overpowered in all of these different brackets. So for the first few, they were really looking at, or did they change it? Champion feedback. Okay, so they changed it. So that's what it was originally. Sorry. Now they've changed it to this. So they're looking at Pro. Then they're doing that's the same Iron 4 to Gold 1. Then they made it Plat 4 to Diamond 3, and then they made it Diamond 2 to Challenger as this. Then they change these criteria. So if something is considered overpowered, if it has a 54% win rate, kind of in both of these, or if it is below the average win rate but has 5 times the average ban rate. So if it's banned a ton. When they get into Elite, they're looking at greater than a 50% average ban rate. And then in Pro, they're looking at presence. So they're looking at 95% presence on the current patch, or 90% presence from before, or 85% pick ban presence, and so on and so forth. So you can read that. So basically, they just made it a huge statistical breakdown, and they're just talking about whether or not that has been successful. They make claims like every champion has been viable in at least one of the 4 skill levels. Well, what I would say is, what does viable mean? To me, if something has a 45% or lower win rate, then it's not viable. And I feel like there are several champions that do not meet that criteria, that have not met that criteria for much of the season, right? If we look at win rates here, and it depends on if it's a mainstream champion or not, right? Is Kiana supposed to be playable in the jungle or not? I guess all of these do have a greater than a 45% win rate. So I think there have been some outliers that are either not viable or are a very low threshold of people can play and maybe win with them, but they don't see widespread adoption, and they've never been a defining feature of any meta, right? So that kind of gets into popularity, that kind of gets into power level. But I would say that, and they're saying at one of the skill levels, right? So it could be viable in Iron, but not viable in Challenger. I just don't like the word viable because it means like basically anything, right? But I would say like optimal or desired in a meta. There are definitely a lot of champions where that has not worked. However, on the statistical side, I will say that in general, most champions that are played most of the time that have a significant representation have been in that 48 to 52% play rate, and there have not been many outside of the 47 to 53. So I think that statistically they have narrowed that band. They have gotten it close to 50%. So overall, for the vast majority of champions outside of specific exceptions, I think that that's probably pretty true statistically. Now they're talking about experienced win rates here, so like one tricks, and they're saying that they want to do more to try to crack down on one tricks succeeding. I really don't like this because a major factor that they don't talk about here is one tricks typically will have a much higher win rate, champions that are only played by one tricks, just because they don't have noobs weighing it down, basically, right? Like they don't have people that are first timing the champ or don't know what they're doing, dragging the win rate down closer to 50%. If it's only specialists playing a champion, something like an Aurelion Sol, which they mentioned specifically here in a second, of course it's going to bring the win rate up because there's just not as many people that are playing it. So you're not going to have auto-filled people or as many YOLO people. It's not going to get as many like all caps videos and stuff on YouTube. It's just not going to get as much attention, especially if it's not viable in pro either, or if it's not like heavily played in pro. So I don't really like them cracking down on one tricks. They're mentioning it here, and they're trying to justify the Aurelion Souls. He's a small but steady rotating doors of players trying him out. It's like, no, man. If you look at Soul, like, that champion has been irrelevant for years. There's like one guy, basically, who's played it in pro, over time, and otherwise, just like nobody plays this champion. I mean, he has less than a 1% play rate, and he's got a 52% win rate, right? Versus if we look at, something like a Nivea has a higher win rate, almost a 4% play rate. Even Pantheon, higher win rate. What are the highest win rate champs right now in this role? Like, all of these are outliers, too. Like, they have a very low, like, Rumble, for example. Rumble in the middle. It has a higher win rate, higher play rate. Pantheon, Corki. So there aren't many, but I just feel like Aurelion Sol was getting unfairly targeted just because people were complaining about him or something like that. I don't know. But I don't like that idea of nerfing those champs. What I would like to see as an alternative is to show enemy nameplates. That fixes so many problems. We'll talk about that with dodging here in a second, but show the names of enemies so that people can look them up and make informed decisions about dodging. That way, if there are some of these little niche champions that are weird, like Aurelion Sol, and someone's afraid that, like, oh, what if I run into that one-trick Aurelion Sol in Challenger? This is never a problem outside of, like, Challenger or Masters, by the way. Like, these little weird picks, because you're just not going to run into them enough in, like, Gold to really statistically impact your elo, right? Maybe you run into that one Aurelion Sol guy in Gold, and then you never play another Aurelion Sol for 300 games, right? So it's just not statistically significant in terms of affecting your MMR. And so who cares if it has a high win rate if it's not affecting people's MMR significantly, right? So this is really only in Challenger or Grandmasters where you're going to see that same person a lot. You might see that Aurelion Sol 1 out of 10 games, and that could impact potentially. But if you see who they're playing and you don't want to deal with it, then you can just ban it, right? So I think that would encourage a much more diverse meta overall because the top-end best picks would be banned out more, and it would discourage people from these one-trick specialist champs. Because I think that system is so much better than saying, hey, you know what, gold and silver players, you can't play Aurelion Sol because it's balanced around this one guy who plays it in Challenger, right, that has a 58% win rate or something. So I just don't think that's fair to a lot of silver and gold players, especially if it has no presence in pro. I know it's debatable how they nerf things for pro and it kind of ruins them for solo queue, stuff like Akali, stuff like Irelia and things like that might be fun for people in solo queue, but that's because they're overly dominant in pro. Things like Aurelion Sol have almost no presence in pro yet, and they aren't very successful in lower elo brackets. Nobody plays them, but they still get nerfed because of Gary the Aurelion Sol guy, in Challenger, right? And I think that's not right. So I can understand stuff has to get nerfed for pro for competitive integrity, but if it's just a few guys in Challenger, like, that would be very easily fixed by showing nameplates. And you know what? That works in pro too. So if you play against Huhi in pro, you know he's Huhi, and you can ban Aurelion Sol. And people do that. They do that all the time. They're like, oh, we're playing against this one person who's really well known for playing this specialist champion, so we're just going to use a ban on it, right? So anyways, I know that feels bad for like one tricks to potentially get banned out, and that's one of the major reasons why they're probably not going to do that, is because they want to sell a lot of skins, and they try to turn the one tricking thing, they try to monetize the one tricking thing by turning it into something that casuals can get behind and can enjoy. So it does apply to pros, but if you just look at the suite of like products that they offer, you have the skins, but then you also have the Eternal series, right? You can buy these Eternals that shows as you level up with certain champions. They have the mastery point system. So this lets people kind of feel good about the game and stay engaged, even if they, you know, stay in silver for 3 or 4 seasons in a row. At least they're racking up mastery points. At least they have these Eternals. At least they can buy all of these new skins for their favorite champion. It keeps people engaged. It monetizes that engagement for Riot. And so if they were able to ban out one tricks like that, that would hurt a large part of sort of their strategy towards keeping people engaged. Because that's the biggest thing in League of Legends, is it's a very competitive game, but most people are not going to climb. Just because of how averages work and how difficult it is to climb, most people are not going to climb. So how do you keep people playing when they're not climbing, and when there's this predominant culture of you can't enjoy the game unless you're climbing or unless you're making some kind of progress? You can't just play the game just because it's fun to play the game, God forbid. You've got to have some notion of progress, right? And so this creates that progress by having the Eternals, by having this mastery system, all that stuff. So that's why they probably won't show the nameplates, but that would be such a better fix than just nerfing these weird champs that a couple of people play really well in Challenger, which makes them inaccessible for people at lower elo brackets. So I really don't like that approach, but we'll see what they do. Again, Pro is a different story, but if it's just solo queue, I think you should just be able to ban people out for that. Okay. And then Pro Play meta, blah, blah, blah. They're talking like it has helped. Maybe it has, but there are definitely some champions that stuck around for way too long that were really obviously overpowered, like Xin Zhao, and like some other champions just dominated, you know, had over an 80% or 90% representation. And I think that if something has an 80 or 90% pick rate, you need to nerf something about that champ. Not for like, definitely if it's lasted for like a couple of patches. I'm not saying you have to turbo nerf it, and it doesn't even necessarily mean that the champion is super like overpowered in terms of can 1v9 snowball. It might just mean they're too consistent and they fit into too many different team comps. But that still is squeezing out competition from other roles. That's suppressing all of these other champs that could also be played to fit that role, but this one champ is just a little bit better at it. Okay. So anyways, sure, that's fine. Item balance, I think it's been horrible this season, to be perfectly honest. And I enjoy playing the game, and I always, will enjoy playing the game, and I'll just keep playing it. But the items, I just do not like what they've done this season. I mean, if you are a bruiser, it's good, but I think almost any other class, it's been relatively bad. And there have been so many items that are overpowered on bruisers and fighters the entire season. Right, we've seen Gore Drinker early, then Gore Drinker got nerfed, then it was Stride Breaker, then Stride Breaker got nerfed, and Gore Drinker got buffed, and people were playing that. And then Sterix has been really strong the entire time. And you just have a suite of other items that are really good too, right? You've got your Wit's End, which has been really overpowered for multiple patches now. And it just goes on and on and on. There's just so many items for those types of champs that give you everything you could ever want. It gives you ability haste, plus survivability in terms of health and armor, plus damage. Okay, stars. That's awesome, Marie. Okay, go put some stars on some things. So there haven't been enough meaningful trade-offs, I don't think. Like, every item has every stat that you would want for most champions, especially the mythics. And so people just pick whichever mythic is best and they just run with it. I mean, I don't have all of the hard stats on these champs, but it feels like there definitely are very dominant mythics in most metas, and then the same champions almost always get the same second and third item. Like, I just feel like there's a lot less diversity in many roles. Support, for sure there is, right? They got rid of Athene's. Now Locket is a choice you have to make. You can't get Locket plus some of these other items. They've restricted Locket. They have nerfed a lot of the Forbidden Idol items. Now, they've buffed those back up a little bit, but I just feel like the builds used to be so much more diverse on so many champions, where you could open with Locket, you could open with Knight's Vow, you could open with Zeke's, depending on the champion. And especially with enchanters, right? You could go Redemption, you could go Athene's, you could go on Rakan, you could even get a mixture of like going Zeke's into Redemption. You could go Mikhail's, you could go Ardent Censor. Like, there were so many different permutations of items you could get on these champs, and now it just feels like you just go Shirelia's, maybe Moonstone if it's Soraka, and then you have to get the Grievous Wound item, and then after that is kind of whatever, maybe you have a choice, Mikhail's or Redemption or something, but it just feels like there aren't as many options. So I think it's been good for some classes, but I think it's been really bad especially for enchanters, mages, and tanks as well. They nerfed a lot of the tank items early, but the problem is there's so much damage, there's so much true damage, percentage damage, and there's so much lifesteal in the game right now that tanks just can't, most tanks can't do anything. Like, they're just not going to do as much sustained damage as these other bruisers with the lifesteal items. So it's like they can't burst fast enough, and they can't do enough sustained damage to kill them. So this tanks have been blasted all season, except for very, very early on when Sunfire was really OP. But other than that, I just feel like it's been League of Bruisers all season. So I think that's not great. So hopefully they change that around a little bit. And then they're saying they're adding in these items, you know, that have been useful. Like, what do they say here? It was something like the much of our initial work focus on addressing. This is not initial work addressing like Everfrost and Stridebreaker. This is like almost near the end of the season. And they added in these extra items, Anathema's Chains and Hullbreakers. These are extremely niche that have really not affected the meta in a significant way, in my opinion. It's like, yeah, sometimes people get Anathemas, occasionally. I feel like it just doesn't matter most of the time. And then Hullbreaker also seems very niche for split pushers, but it's not addressing this core problem of way too much lifesteal, way too much survivability, and just too many good stats on the first couple of items that just give you everything you'd ever want as a bruiser. No trade-offs, no meaningful trade-offs. Okay, champion releases. Don't count Mundo as a release. I can't believe they're even counting this. Like, it doesn't matter. It's the same champ. Like, they changed around a couple of his abilities. He's still just a huge meat stick that runs at you, that just gets kited or CC'd and just blown up by all of the true damage, percentage damage, lifesteal, all that stuff. Grievous wounds all over his ult. It just feels like he just doesn't do anything. And it just was a really lackluster rework in my mind. I do think that Gwen is kind of interesting, but they just kind of nerfed her into the dirt because she was too good in Pro. Viego, I think, is interesting, but still a little overloaded in his kit in many ways. And Akshan, I think, is pretty interesting. So I think a lot of the new champs have been interesting, but some of these, like, you know, reworks in quotes like Mundo have just not been that great. Some reworks in the past have been good. Okay, so looking at competitive and behavioral things, again, I want to try to keep this under 30, so we're going to keep going. But overall, champion releases are fine. The remakes, not so great, but I think that the champions themselves have felt unique, have felt interesting. So I think that is a high point, even if they are a little overpowered at times. I think they're pretty cool. Okay, competitive and behavioral systems. Okay, dodging. So I really disagree with them a lot here, and some of these stats seem really off to me, but we'll see. So this one's controversial. They say we're treating dodging as a problem because it's not one person, because it's one person's decision to end the game. This leads to play sessions where you're in queue or champ select for hours only to get into one game. Again, this is an extremely small minority of players. This is challenger players. I don't think, I mean, like, I get it. You want challengers to have a good experience because those are the streamers and that's the face of your organization. That's where a lot of kind of the entertainment value of the game comes from, is people watching streamers playing the game. But I don't think you should punish 99% of the player base because the streamers have a problem. If they want to, like, crack down on dodging or take it out or whatever, do it at a high level. Kind of like what you did with Duo Q. The stuff that you're messing with, Masters Plus. Because it's a whole different thing. And frankly, people in Challenger, they should be able to work this out a lot more than someone in Gold, right? People in Masters and Challenger are usually, you know, really good players. And if they are picking something weird, often it's because they're really good on it, right? That's not going to be the case in Gold and Silver most of the time. And a lot of times they know each other. So if they get off-rolled, you can say, oh, hey, Double Lift, you know, do you want ADC? I got off-rolled as ADC. So they kind of know each other, and they're willing to switch around a lot more than in Gold and Silver. And they're just committed to winning more. So I think maybe they should be able to find a way to get through the game, right? And if there's just like one guy who's thinking about dodging just because he's trying to, you know, protect his 90% win rate from his Smurf to Masters challenge or something, yeah, that's unnecessary. Usually they should be able to play it out. But I think that's far different in gold and silver, where you have this guy, you know, who got auto-filled as support and wants to, you know, first-time Master Yi support because YOLO. You know, like, the only defense that you have against that is a dodge, right? They have these, like, pre-game lobbies where you can report people. It really doesn't matter that much unless they accumulate things. And they're saying, like, it's saving people time, that, like, dodging takes longer to get the game going. It's saving time to dodge, right? I think a lot of people would say, hey, do you want to be stuck in a game for 20 or 25 minutes with this guy who's playing something awful and he's just clearly going to troll? Do you want to waste 25 minutes? Or would you rather just spend, you know, 1 more minute in your silver game, joining another lobby, and then, you know, going 1 more minute through the lobby, or 2 minutes or whatever through the lobby to get a higher quality game? Most people would rather see a dodge and a higher quality game. I'm happy when most people dodge in my games. I'm like, sweet, I didn't have to do it. They did it. In a lot of situations. So sometimes it's a little annoying if it's on the enemy team and you're not sure what's happening. Sometimes they dodge games, but I'd say a good chunk of the time I'm like, thank God I didn't have to dodge that because someone else did. So I don't necessarily think that it's bad. And I know that I'm a little more cerebral about that than a lot of people. A lot of people just want a game immediately. But when the queue in silver is probably like 1 minute or something, I just don't think it's like that big of a deal. And most people in silver and gold don't even dodge. Most people, I'd say a lot of people don't even know what dodging is, right? I have a whole video on it. Watch it on the channel. I can't cover it right now. We're going to run out of time. But yeah, they're saying that that people should have to play it out unless you have someone that's deliberately saying they're gonna end the game there. So gray zone, where we never agree on. If a teammate's on a losing streak or picks a champion they have a low win rate on, or a champion we just nerfed, or your comp has bad matchups, we believe you should be able to play that out. But a lot of times it's not just one person, right? If I'm thinking about a dodge, usually there's 2 or 3 people on your team that are having those types of problems. And I think a lot of people are like that. Most people are not going to dodge if there's just one thing that's kind of questionable on your team. It's usually when there's multiple things. To us, Champ Select is a skill test. Yeah, but that's not... Like, this dodging is a skill. It's like folding in poker. You're getting a whole bunch of random variables, and if you can't decline those variables, there's less skill. Right? Because then you just get whatever you're dealt, and you just have to play your hand. Just imagine poker if people literally had to play their hand the entire time and just never folded. It would just be completely random RNG most of the time. Like, I mean, you have, like, bluffing, I guess. Like, there's some to it. But it would take away a huge portion of the skill, which is the dodging itself. You know how you could fix this, once again? Show enemy nameplates. Because if you do that, you're going to know who's on the enemy team. So that way, if you have someone top lane who's auto-filled, who is going to have a low percentage win rate, you can use your bans to help them out. Ban out the top 3 champions of the other person on the enemy team who's also playing top lane. That'll even it out a little bit, right? Or you could at least see, okay, Larry on our team is first timing Teemo top. You go look over there. It's like, oh, Jimmy on their team is first timing Malphite top. I guess this is playable. He's not going to get completely stomped, right? So it just gives you more information, and with more information, you could better decide if you need to dodge or not, and the dodges would go down dramatically, because right now, a lot of times you have to dodge just because you don't know what's on the enemy team, right? When you see, you know, Jenny on your team is, like, first timing Singe top, and, you know, X person on the enemy team is playing Riven, you kind of have to assume, okay, that person's probably a one-trick Riven, because a lot of Rivens are, but it could just be, you know, Johnny over there trying out Riven because he saw a cool all caps video and it's his first time Riven as well. You just don't know. So just having that knowledge would help. Again, I don't think they're going to do it, but that would be helpful. So we'll just have to see what they do here. The dodging 3+ times a day is probably okay. To have a bigger penalty on that, that is not happening that often most of the time, I think. But anyways, we'll see. So I think how this usually goes down is a lot of challengers don't like dodging, but a lot of other people do, because challengers, it's going to take, you know, 15 minutes to get through a queue a lot of times. So again, I think the solution is Masters Plus, no dodging, or a stronger penalty or something like that on the dodging. But I think for like Diamond and lower, it's fine. Okay, matchmaking, all players are getting their primary role 90% of the time. I just don't feel like that's true. I mean, they wouldn't say it if it wasn't, probably, but like, really? Mid laners? If they're queuing up as mid lane, are they literally getting mid lane? Or when they say primary, do they mean mid plus their secondary, mid plus top? They're getting one of those. I could maybe believe that, where 10% are autofills, where it's third position or further back. But literally all of mid lane, at all ranks, matchmade teammates are less than a full tier 99%. So that means that 99% of the time, half the time, you could be gold 1 playing against someone who's gold 4, which is not great. But in general, unless there's duos involved, I feel like a lot of the time it is within a couple of divisions. So I think that has gotten a little bit better. Queue times are lower. I like that. Then thinking about like Smurf queue or whatever, I'm not really sure. They don't release a lot of info on this. I would say this does not apply to the vast majority of people, because I think it only activates if the account doesn't have a lot of games on it. And I don't believe there's such a thing as winners queue either. We've talked about that a ton on the stream. I've only got a few more minutes, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on that. But the vast majority of matchmaking is just strictly made on the basis of what your hidden MMR is, which is just closely tied together with how many wins and how many losses you have. Disruptive behavior. Okay, so they're doing reporting confidence. I'm not really sure what that means. That means that if someone reports and they're accurate on it, then it gives them higher weighting. Just bring back the tribunal. Just let people see the reports and vote on them, and just outsource the information. And then instead of just flat out banning somebody, just create certain thresholds. Just say, hey, look, if 90% of the people who viewed this file voted as a punish, said this was a violation, then just have one of your staff personally look at it and make the judgment call, right? So you're not looking at all of the reports. You're getting most of the people in the community to do that work for you. You're just making that final assessment on the most egregious cases. So, I mean, yeah, it's easy to pick out people who say certain keywords, right? Or people who literally AFK in the base, but it's really hard for an automated system to detect when someone's just running circles in the jungle, right? I mean, maybe there are some metrics they could do to look at that, but anyways, okay, I guess they're looking at it some more. That's good. Honor, just no one cares about honor anymore. Yeah, it's been falling short for a long time. It's bad. Just no one cares. I think what they should do is you get like some kind of RP or a skin of your choice at the end of the season if you're in like Honor 4 or 5. Just getting the same Twitch or Warwick skin every single year when it's been available for like 5 years or something now is not really that exciting. Or do a special skin for Honor. Kind of like what you do just for people who are gold and higher. Just make a special skin that's for like people that are rank 4 Honor or something or higher. Right? Or maybe you could say rank 3 or higher. So the baseline or higher, you get a skin, and then you get a special chroma if it's 4, or a special chroma if it's 5. Is it really that hard to do that? If your goal is to try to incentivize people to have better behavior, is that really going to cost you that much just to make one special skin for the Honor? I really don't think that's too much of an investment. Now, again, I feel like this kind of gets into punishment in general. This is the flip side, rewarding. But I think that most people who are doing this bad behavior are impulsive and not thinking rationally or reasonably. So that's why I think that rewards and punishment systems don't always work. I mean, sometimes they do, but people just, will cuss people out. They just have impulse control. So I don't know. I mean, I guess it couldn't hurt to have an honor system. I still think there will be some bad behavior. But, they say that after punishing people, they do get some better results. So maybe after, giving people some bonuses, you'd get some better results too. All right, we're going to go a little bit over, but there's just so much information here. I'll keep it pretty close. The first match, so they're talking about some new items coming in the preseason. Obviously, when this comes out, I'll give some more information about it. But defensive mythic in the lost chapter space, so a mana regen defensive item, may just struggle to make an impact around the map because they can be killed so easily, so it's hard for them to roam. Depends on the mage. And Everfrost settled. Mages are a little bit on the underpowered side. Everfrost is more of locking down enemies than keeping them off of you. Okay, it's CC. I mean, you can reposition off of CC. New Mythic will guard mages by reducing incoming champion damage for a brief period of time when they're first attacked. This sounds like a horrible idea. So how are assassins supposed to kill mages now? Assassins should beat mages a lot of the time if they get ahead and if there's good positioning. There's already Zanyas. Like, a lot of people still get Zanyas. So this is another defense, and there's Banshee's Veil. So this is another defensive item where you take extreme reduced damage. My question here is, we'll see, but like, what happens if you put something like that on like a Diana or an assassin? I mean, they say this is for mages, but or like Rise. You know, what happens if Rise has this defensive item plus Zanyas plus you know, Banshees or something, or like Cassiopeia? Like, these champs are extremely difficult to deal with if you don't blow them up immediately. So I don't know. It's a little dangerous. I just don't think it's necessary. There already are some defensive options out there. Like, I don't know. Okay. The second new mage item is a legendary that helps mages tear through shields. I do not like this you know, OP counter, you know, type of meta. I just don't like it. Like, making Grievous, like making lifesteal so strong that everyone has to buy Grievous Wounds because the lifesteal is so strong. And then the Grievous Wounds become so strong with the 60% that they have to buff up lifesteal, or then lifesteal all of a sudden is not going to be useful. And it's just this arms race of these counter forces. It's like, why don't you just make healing a little more balanced and just take away Grievous Wounds? I don't know. Or just make Grievous Wounds less. Make healing like a very specific niche thing where you have to go out of your way to buy it, and you're actually sacrificing stats to get it, like the old school Bloodthirster. You're sacrificing crit to get that. And so it has utility, it's useful, but it's a very strong strategic trade-off. So that way you don't have to nerf healing as much because it's nerfing itself. You already aren't going to have enough damage if you itemize into too much healing. Right? So yeah, you'll survive longer, but you're not going to be able to kill anybody because you're not going to have the same damage as Infinity Edge. Right? If you take Bloodthirster, which was, you know, what happened back in the day. So just...
Time to go upstairs.
Oh my god, this freaking thing. Turn off alarms!
Time to go upstairs.
Gosh, sorry guys. It's freaking Alexa. I don't know if they're going to turn it off or not. It's like an alarm in here. Anyways, like, how about just trade-offs for stats? I know that's a crazy idea, but that way you don't have to nerf it. Just make it a realistic trade-off, right? Just don't allow there to be Gore Drinker plus Conqueror plus all this other garbage, all, like, with no trade-offs. You know, you've got stuff like Gore Drinker, which, you know, has AD on it, has health on it, has lifesteal on it, has wave clear, ability haste, just everything. Like, why? Just don't. So I think that's a much better way to do it. And now it's like bleeding over into shields. So recently they've like made these shield buster items, like the lethality item that busts shields, and then they've made champions that break shields too, right? Like Rel or Blitzcrank, Renekton. And it's just like, why don't you just make shields more reasonable? They're already, I mean, just lower them on items. Like, there's no reason that you should have Sterix giving people like 800 shields or Shieldbow giving people like 500 shields on an offensive item. Like, just lower the shields. I don't know. So I just don't like the hard counter system because it just forces people into certain items and item paths, and it just takes away a lot of the creativity. So just have there be bigger trade-offs, or just take shielding off of items. You know, unequivocal shielding. You use like something else. I don't know. But yeah, I don't like this idea. Tear through shields, increases penetration against low health and recently shielded enemies, and should be enticing. Now, if it's an execute also, like, why is it a shield buster and an execute item on one? Like, I don't know. I guess it's like they're trying to create something that specifically counters Sterix or Shieldbow. When someone gets low, they get this shield. It's like, just nerf those items. Like, you're creating a new item just to basically try to nerf them. But it's going to hit the creativity or the versatility of builds. New tank items. So support tanks are often pinned in the Locket of the Iron Solari, therefore its defensive strengths. Yes. Do you know why that is? Because of its cost. It's 2,500 gold, right? If these other items, other tank items that were available cost less gold, people would probably, consider those items. But that's why. It's strictly the cost, especially when you're thinking about supports. So just lower the cost of one other support item that could be interesting, like that whatever it is, the fist. It's not Iceborne Gauntlet, I don't remember, the frozen fist thing. It's like 3,200 gold. Just lower that down or whatever. The problem is there's like this overlap. They're classifying something as a tank, right? And so they have like Sunfire and that frozen fist thing and a couple of other items all as tank items, but there's a difference in budget and power level between solo lane tanks or jungle tanks and support tanks. Support tanks are supports first and tanks secondary. And what I mean by that is they are on a support budget. So they need to have an item or items that are on par with enchanters in terms of cost, even if they're not on par in terms of scaling. I kind of like that enchanters scale better with plus healing and shielding because they're a lot weaker early, but the cost should be very similar, right? It should be in that 2,300 to 2,500 range for those items. So I think that's just a little goofy, and now they're saying whenever a user immobilizes an enemy champion, all nearby enemies take increased damage. So a Mega Abyssal Mask, yeah. And that sounds way too powerful most of the time. It's like, think of the purpose. Like, Locket is a defensive, like, team fight item, and now they're just creating another, defensive team fight item, right? But it's going to amp up damage instead of give a big shield. It's like, how about you offer like a mobility item for tanks or something like that? Make Righteous Glory into a more, I guess they turned that into Turbo Chem Tank. But yeah, make that a 2,500 gold item. That'd be perfect. Just lower the hell out of the stats on it. Make it a 2,500 gold item. That's much more interesting because then it's a roaming item that's filling that slot of roaming, but it would be much worse in team fight scenarios. That's an interesting trade-off. Or a split-pushing item, right? Like they used to have with Banner of Command or ZZ Rot Portal, where it's like this item is going to be really weak in team fights. The stats aren't that good, but if you want to apply a little bit of extra map pressure to help you take towers or to put some pressure in a side lane so you can threaten objectives or get a high-quality rotation, I think that would also be cool in the support tank role. So you have to like make the stats on those things bad, or make it to where they only activate when you're near allies, or you have to have completed your warding item to buy them. Just something to make sure that solo laners don't buy items that are powerful and under budget. But if you can find a way to just stick that to the support and make sure other roles don't get it, I think that would be much more diverse and much more interesting in terms of strategic options that are tied with different items. But for right now, like, this just looks like more of the same thing. Then looking beyond lane, another common refrain: there aren't enough mana options for spell casting tanks. True. I mean, like, but there kind of are. There's Frozen Heart. Extremely good item, has a lot of mana on it. Zeke's is okay too, but it's not. It's not going to solve all their mana problems. But I think you could just buff those champs like Taric. Just make it to where every time Taric auto-attacks, when he has empowered auto-attacks from his passive, he gains back some mana, or just lower the cost on some of them, right? If you're feeling like Braum's running out of mana, or Nautilus is running out of mana, just lower the cost on Nautilus's E. Lower the cost on Braum's Q. Braum's usually pretty good on mana, but Nautilus is an example of someone who does go pretty quickly. So just lower the cost on these champs. So I don't know if you necessarily need an item for that. Legendary tank item that gives users a large chunk of mana and a new effect that allows them to dip into their mana for additional shields every time they immobilize enemies. So it's like, when you CC people, it takes away some of your mana to give shields. So it's really not giving that much extra mana, it's giving you extra shields, pretty much. So what, it's going to be like a tier item that's kind of like Mer mana, sort of, but it gives you a shield instead of doing extra damage. I'm not really sure. I mean, again, it just doesn't feel like it's going to be that useful or that needed. And a new assassin item, focus on burst damage. Thank God we need more burst on Zed. We wanted to create an option, frequent spell rotations rather than a singular burst output. Ability haste, new effect that refunds ultimate cooldown when you kill an enemy champion. Okay, so you've got ulti hunter on an item. Sounds kind of OP. Anyways, that's going to be it. So thank you very much. I do want to keep it under 40 minutes. So be sure to check out the rest of the videos on the channel. Like and subscribe. Check me out on Twitch, The Strategy Professor. And I'll see you next time.